Knights. I found this quote from Pope Francis, which I think is reflective of what we should all be doing, and probably ties into the discussions we've had this morning. That an authentic faith which is never comfortable or completely personal always involves a desire or a deep desire to change the world, to transmit values, to leave the earth somehow better than we found it. I put this together before Pope Francis died. I was sort of thinking I should look around for a quote from Pope Leo, but instead of a quote, I'll tell you the first joke I heard about Pope Leo. So Pope Leo, as you may know or may not know, studied initially and got a degree in mathematics from Villanova University. So not only does he understand sin, he understands cos and tan. I thought we had a discussion about trust, and I thought it's worthwhile going back to the origins of where we are and the process that the Knights have been through, and what's probably created the environment we now sit in. So initially, this was quoted from the initial start of the Knights, was at the core the Knights were about being Catholic, lay, male and temporal. And were established to be, in a certain way, the Catholic Church's group that went into the civil environment and pushed agendas related to Catholic issues, which is much the same as Brother Brendan has just sort of said in terms of his role that he sees in terms of that threat we face in terms of our Catholic faith. As I see it, there's been three basic changes of direction of the Knights. The first obviously was the establishment. In 1962, there was a meeting to decide that we're an open order. I still see things within the Knights that people still want to, in some way, have us as some mystical order who are a secret society. So, 80 years ago, a decision was made that we're not, but people still, in some places, behave like we are. The next was in 1991, where the decision was made that we are each autonomous state organisations and split the entity into autonomous state organisations. And at that time, there was a national Southern Cross Homes, and each of those state organisations was established in terms of Southern Cross at that time as well. And my question is, what now? But to understand what now, you need to understand what caused that change in 1991. It was, although I'm sure lots of people around here were involved and know, but it was the Australian credit collapse. And what they did was essentially almost bankrupt the organisation in everywhere except for Western Australia, because Western Australia didn't provide a guarantee for the loans that were taken out. And so the assets of orders in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria and South Australia disappeared overnight as a result of that. And there's a quote there from someone, and you probably can't read it, but this was obviously someone, a Catholic family, who had invested their money in Pan Australia. Those invested their life savings in Pan Australia and trusted the Knights of the Southern Cross to safeguard their money were left flabbergasted. They felt cheated, their savings had been deceived by those who trusted. Their anger, their threatened legal action may well have destroyed the remains of the 73-year-old order. And so when we talk about the trust issue, so what did that do? It lost finance, it lost membership, it lost capacity, capability, lost relationships, lost trust, lost mission work, and it lost a strong Catholic organisation. And so at that time, the decision was made, I think, just to save the organisation, which is why the decision was made to split it into separate state entities and start to re-establish itself. So if you don't understand that, you can't understand that lack of trust between some state organisations, the lack of relationship between some state organisations, and it's a bit of a paradox that I haven't sort of been involved in the discussions and changes and rules since then, but the reality is that I don't believe that any decisions be made that it's not just a group of state organisations who are here on the basis of a choice of goodwill, rather than any structural arrangement. In terms of what that meant for Southern Cross Care, each state group, so in that 1991 it split the state groups. Since then we've seen New South Wales disappear into an independent entity, and I can have a discussion about what that is and what it looks like. Victoria disappear into Mercy Health, Tasmania disappear into the Archdiocese of Hobart. We signed an agreement 2 weeks ago and we're going to take over Broken Hill on the 13th of June. Now, the reason we're doing that, and you might say Broken Hill's a long way from Queensland, and having been there a few times, yes it is, but we made that on the basis of our relationship with them as a group of knights, on the basis that if we didn't, they would be in receivership and Catholic aged care facilities in those areas would disappear. They would re-emerge, but I guarantee they wouldn't re-emerge as Catholic.
So you, just to clarify, when you say we, you mean Southern Cross Care Queensland? Yeah. And so we'll, on the 13th of June, become the operator of facilities in Broken Hill and also in Mildura, which are part of that group. Just in terms of those listening online and what that will mean to the relationship, we changed our constitution for Southern Cross Care Queensland last year in anticipation, and so we'll send invites to members of the branches in Broken Hill and Mildura who can then apply to become members of Southern Cross Care Queensland in much the same way as Queensland, where the Knights of, members of Southern Cross Queensland aren't members of the Knights per se in that relationship, but to be member of Southern Cross Care Queensland, you need to be a member of the Knight. So it's an individual choice to apply and then become a member of Southern Cross Care Queensland, and we will give that opportunity to those members of branches in Broken Hill and Mildura to do the same thing so they can maintain that relationship. And, it'll be a process over time in terms of absorbing them into our management structure, but we will maintain their local identity. So aged care environment, and I'll put this up here, it's increasingly, change has been ongoing and really hard in every operation. The regulatory burden seeks to compromise our moral position. I mean, the Commonwealth Government has issued a document saying that operators need to comply with VAD regulations in each of the state. It's none of the business of the Commonwealth Government, but they stuck that in because they didn't agree with the states. And you should be under no illusion there is no desire or interest in Commonwealth Government in supporting Catholic or faith-based organisations. They are ambivalent about who we are. And they're aggressive in terms of all providers, and the underlying thing about faith organisations, compliance is just, and they are seeking to have compliance and to take control in a certain way or direct our finances. You've got for-profit providers that cherry-picking the industry and leaving those with most need to the not-for-profit operators. The increasing governance capacity, so to be a compliant board takes about 1 day a fortnight for a board member on any aged care organisation. A larger organisation takes more. So it's a huge responsibility and liability. Something that really pisses me off. Once a quarter, I have to sign a document to the government with about 30 pages of spreadsheets, and on the signature page it says, if you sign this and it is false, you will be criminally liable. And I just find that really insulting. Yeah. That's just me. Going forward, although government will say they put a lot of money in aged care, the reality is the only money that's gone in aged care, and I don't decry people in aged care increases in wages, the only money that's really gone in is about increasing wages of nurses and some care staff, not all care staff, because they don't count people providing pastoral care as care staff. They don't count people providing activities as care staff. So some care staff have got that, and there's been very little real money gone into actually funding aged care.
I can guarantee over the next 5 to 10 years, the per person component will reduce. So size and efficiency and operations are really important if you're going to survive. In terms of where this sits for Southern Cross Care, we should have a shared future, but because we're not, the only thing that unites us is our name. For the rest of the stuff, we're not really a combined or aligned entity. And I've started trying in terms of that building relationships. Now or every 2 months we get all the chairs together and we have a discussion and starting to build that relationship. But there's only now 2 chairs are members of the Knights. There's 3 chairs I think are probably Catholic. And so that history and that ongoing sort of view of the world is hard to get that alignment. Also having the same name is a real problem because when something happens in a Southern Cross Care facility, the auditors come out and have a look at all this. And so it sends a signal. So it's a genuine risk. And that state-based organisation makes it difficult for have structural changes that go across states. And sort of, there are things that we should be doing together, but because of our governance structure, our membership structure, our state thing, it's very difficult. And so these issues can't be addressed if the capacity of Southern Cross entities doesn't evolve to be able to make it a viable future. I think I'll put this in to understand, and if we look around the room, is our fundamental problem. Sorry, Father, I don't say this to you, but we are all the rest fundamentally white, Anglo-Saxon or Mediterranean people. That's not Australia. This is the first one about populations. Something that's really interesting in terms of this graph, and so these are population peaks, and you see that big mass at the end in terms of people getting older who need care. But I heard an economist sort of describe this as, and the way the political system has worked, baby boomers, us, have a vested interest in getting care. Gen Ys, Gen X are the smallest demographic ever. Gen Ys, the children of baby boomers, have a vested interest in their parents getting care, so they get to inherit it. And so all of the political decisions that have been made about care have been made by the voting power of baby boomers and Gen Ys, and Gen X now millennials will have to pay for that. And so we shouldn't, when we talk about equity, we shouldn't sort of disillusion ourselves by thinking that, we're not having to be paid for by a group who are going forward. We're also going to face an increase of 3.5 million people over the next 10 years. If we look at migration, you can see these are the changes between 2018 and 2023. India is the big growth demographic. All that South Asian demographic, India, Nepal, Pakistan. And then the Philippines is the second big group. So in Australia, and you'll see it in churches represented everywhere, those South Asian groups, those groups in the Philippines are going to make a big difference. And so 31% of the population were born overseas. 1/3 of Australia was not born in Australia. Yeah. So we need to understand that if we're really going to cope with what the world's thinking. The other thing is, a lot of them don't speak English at home. And so Mandarin was the second language that was spoken, but the ticks are there because they're all the different Indian languages. And so for us getting a workforce, when you have a population where English isn't their first language, is ongoing increasingly difficult for us in terms of that culture and what that means for us. And it also speaks to the Knights in terms of where they go. And who are going to be the workers? So this changed the working population percentages from 25 to 35. Obviously the baby boomers reduced from 17 down to 13. We'll get the Gen Z will increase from 23 to 25. So predominantly the group around this table will go out of the workforce, and predominantly there'll be other areas in the workforce that are significantly increased. So how does KSC survive when they're confronted with this demographic reality? I won't talk about this because Mick's going to talk about it later. It's a quote that was taken by an article that he put together, he cited, which talks about organisations and what people are and aren't prepared to look at. But if I look at this comes from the document on the synodality. So communities will therefore see themselves as primarily devoted to the service and mission that the faith will carry out within society, in family and in working life. They will therefore not remain focused exclusively on the activities that take place within their own communities and upon their own organisational needs. And so, And so my real question is, how does KSC renew itself as leaders in a synodal church in Australia? Thank you.
A comment, please, if I may. When I interact with people of some faith or good faith or no faith whatsoever, I ask the question, what does it mean to be human? And I use the word, which I've coined, is that we human beings have a threeness about us. We have a body, we have a mind, and we have an inner life. So even people who are atheists or no faith dimension whatsoever acknowledge that we all have an inner life. And I said, well, we give a name to our inner life, and that is, I use the word either heart or soul or spirit. And I ask people playfully, which word do you prefer? And they answer, and different people have a preference for one of those words. But by asking the question, they are acknowledging that we have an inner life. So people who are aged and in need, they need care in all three areas of life. So I would suggest that we must, at some level, become philosophers and engaged in rhetoric with others, that trying to persuade them that to be human is not just binary, it's three. We have a threeness about us, and we need to establish the reality of our inner life. Now, I'm not talking about faith or belief in God or belief in eternal life. I'm not talking about those things. But philosophy does give us a tool to answer the mindset of public servants and Australian society about what does it mean to be human. That's the level we're at. So we're in a culture war around what it means to be human.